Imagine a man, already with gray hair, who has been caring for his paralyzed daughter with all his love and dedication for 25 years. He believes he knows every detail of her life, every secret, every sigh. But one ordinary night, he decides to install security cameras in the house. And what does he see the next day? Something that goes beyond any comprehension. Something that he could never, in his worst nightmares, imagine. What did these images reveal? How could something so devastating remain hidden for so long? That is exactly what you are about to find out. Harold stood in the dim light of the attic, the musty air thick with dust and memories. The wooden beams creaked under his weight as he navigated through the maze of boxes piled high, each one a testament to the life he once had. His heart felt heavy, not just from the physical burden of lifting boxes, but from the emotional toll of revisiting his past. It had been 25 years since he had lost his wife, and in that time, he had buried himself in the care of his paralyzed daughter, Sarah, avoiding the memories that haunted him. Glancing around, Harold spotted a box with frayed edges, its corners softened by time. He hesitated, recalling the memories that lay within. After a moment, he steeled himself and lifted the lid. Inside, he found a jumble of old photographs, letters, and keepsakes that told the story of a life filled with love, laughter, and eventually loss. His fingers trembled as he picked up a photograph of his wife, her smile radiant, her eyes sparkling with dreams that Harold could no longer remember. As he sifted through the contents, something caught his eye, a dusty, old videotape. It was labeled Family Memories. A pang of nostalgia shot through him. He hadn't seen a video in years, and the thought of hearing his wife's voice again filled him with both longing and dread. He carefully set the tape aside, deciding to finish his search before confronting the memories it might hold. After an hour of labor, the attic was a bit more organized, but Harold felt a growing urgency to watch the tape. He climbed down the rickety stairs and dusted off the old VCR that had seen better days. With a deep breath, he inserted the tape and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, revealing a younger version of his wife, Claire, sitting in their living room, surrounded by toys and drawings. "Hi, Sarah. If you're watching this, it means I'm not there with you," she said, her voice warm and inviting. "I wanted to share some dreams I have for you, my sweet girl." Harold felt a lump form in his throat as he watched the joy on Claire's face, a stark contrast to the heaviness that enveloped their home now. He leaned in closer, captivated by the memories unfolding before him. Claire spoke about the importance of following one's passions, the beauty of art, and the simple joys of life. "I hope you always remember to chase your dreams and never be afraid to be yourself," she said, her eyes shimmering with love. As the video progressed, the scene shifted to a home video of Sarah as a teenager, her laughter echoing through the living room. She was vibrant, full of life, and Harold couldn't help but smile, even as pain gripped his heart. "I want to be an artist," Sarah exclaimed, her enthusiasm palpable. "I want to paint the world in colors no one has ever seen." Harold's smile faded, replaced by a deep sorrow. He had missed so much. He had been so consumed by grief and the demands of caring for Sarah that he had neglected to nurture her dreams. He felt a rush of regret wash over him, mixing with the nostalgia. Suddenly, the recording shifted again, now showing Sarah in a more vulnerable moment with a friend. Harold's heart sank as he watched her share her insecurities, the pressure she felt to be perfect. "I just want to make everyone happy," Sarah confessed, "but it's exhausting, and I don't even know who I am anymore." Harold's chest tightened. He had no idea his daughter felt this way. He paused the video, his mind racing. Had he truly been so blind? He felt a wave of guilt wash over him, realizing how little he had understood about Sarah's struggles. As he sat there in the dim light, surrounded by the echoes of the past, Harold knew he was at a crossroads. The recording had opened a door to emotions he had long suppressed, and he could no longer ignore the truth of their fractured relationship. He needed to confront these revelations, not just for himself, but for Sarah. The journey ahead felt daunting, yet Harold understood that it was time to face the ghosts of their shared past, starting with the one person who mattered most, his daughter. Harold sat in his dimly lit living room, the flickering light from the old television casting shadows across his weary face. The memory of his wife, a vibrant presence that had once filled their home with laughter, lingered heavily in the air. He had stumbled upon a dusty box in the attic, filled with remnants of a happier past, photographs, love letters, and now, the unexpected treasure of a videotape. As he inserted the tape into the player, a torrent of emotions washed over him. Anticipation anticipation intertwined with dread. The screen brightened, revealing his wife, her familiar smile radiating warmth. "Hi, sweetheart. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I wanted to share some of my dreams for you and your sister," she said, her voice a melodic reminder of happier times. Harold's heart sank as he watched her recount her hopes for Sarah, hopes he felt had since shattered like glass. As the video progressed, Harold's breath hitched in his throat when he saw a younger Sarah, full of life and energy. She sat with a friend, her laughter echoing through the years. "I just want to be good enough," Sarah confided, her youthful face shadowed with vulnerability. "Everyone expects so much from me. It's like I'm always on display, and if I slip, everything will fall apart." Harold's heart twisted painfully in his chest. He had always believed he understood his daughter, but the raw honesty in her confession struck him like a thunderbolt. "You'll always be perfect to me, Sarah," her friend reassured her, but Harold could see the doubt flickering in Sarah's eyes. It was a moment of intimacy he had been blind to, a glimpse into the pressure she felt to meet unspoken expectations. Suddenly, the scene shifted. The atmosphere turned tense as the video showed Sarah in a heated argument with that same friend. "You don't get it. You never have," Sarah shouted, her voice laden with frustration. "I can't live like this anymore." The argument escalated, and Harold felt as if he had been punched in the gut when Sarah stormed out of the frame, her young spirit bruised and broken. Harold instinctively paused the video, his heart racing. The weight of the revelations crashed down upon him. Did he truly know his daughter? The answer was no. He had been so wrapped up in his own grief and struggles that he had failed to notice the silent battles Sarah was fighting. Guilt gnawed at him like a relentless beast. If only he had been more attentive, more present. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he replayed the scenes in his mind. The memories flooded back, moments of laughter, shared meals, and the warmth of family gatherings. Yet, behind those cherished memories lay shadows he had been unwilling to face. Harold's mind raced with questions. What if he had asked the right questions? What if he had created a space for her to express her fears? The room felt suffocating, the air thick with unspoken words and unresolved pain. Harold leaned back in his chair, staring blankly at the screen, feeling the weight of his neglect. "I could have saved you," he whispered into the silence, though he knew it wasn't entirely true. He couldn't save her from herself, but he could have been there to support her. Taking a deep breath, Harold reached for the remote and turned off the television, the screen fading to black. He felt the heaviness in his chest, a mix of sorrow and determination. He needed to confront the ghosts of their past, to bridge the chasm that had grown between him and Sarah. The tape had unearthed painful truths, but perhaps it could also be the catalyst for healing. As he sat in the quiet of the room, Harold resolved to reach out to Sarah, to listen and understand her in ways he hadn't before. It was time to open the lines of communication, to let her know that she was not alone in her struggles. The path ahead would not be easy, but he was ready to face it one step at a time. Harold sat in the dim light of the living room, his heart heavy as he turned to face Sarah, who was in her wheelchair, her gaze fixed on the floor. The old recording still played softly in the background, the voice of his late wife echoing with warmth and dreams long forgotten. He took a deep breath, the weight of the past pressing down on him, and finally broke the silence that had lingered for so long. "Sarah," he began hesitantly, "I found something in the attic today. It's a recording of your mother. I thought it might be good for us to watch it together." Sarah's head snapped up, a mix of apprehension and curiosity in her eyes. "What's on it?" she asked, her tone defensive. It was a natural reaction, as she had spent years building walls around her heart to protect herself from pain. "Just memories," Harold replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Her dreams, her hopes for you." A flicker of something, fear, perhaps, crossed Sarah's face. "I don't want to watch it," she said quickly, turning away from him. "It just makes everything worse." But Harold felt a surge of determination. "I think we need to. We've been living in silence for too long, and maybe this can help us understand each other better." He paused, searching for the right words. "I've been so focused on taking care of you that I forgot to really see you." Sarah's defenses began to waver as she looked back at her father. "You don't know what it was like for me back then, Dad. You were always so distant." Her voice cracked with emotion, revealing the turmoil she had kept hidden for years. "I didn't realize," he admitted, his heart aching. "I was lost in my own grief. I thought I was doing what was best for us, but I see now that I wasn't there for you when you needed me the most." The atmosphere in the room thickened with unspoken words. Harold could see the tension etched in Sarah's features, the hurt that had been building up for so long. Gathering his courage, he continued. If you're willing, I'd like us to watch it together. Maybe it can open a door for us. With a hesitant nod, Sarah agreed, and Harold felt a small glimmer of hope as he pressed play. The screen flickered to life, showing his wife's radiant smile, her laughter ringing out like a distant bell. Memories swirled in Harold's mind, bittersweet and haunting. As the video played, Sarah's expression shifted from curiosity to discomfort. I remember this, she whispered, her eyes glazing over as she watched her younger self, vibrant and full of dreams. I was so naive. Naive? Harold echoed, surprised. You were full of life, Sarah. You had so much potential. Potential? That's rich coming from you, she replied, her voice rising. You didn't even notice when I started to fall apart. I was drowning, and you were too busy with your own grief to see it. Harold flinched at her words, but he knew they were true. I know I failed you, he said softly. I wish I could take it back. I wish I could have been there. The recording shifted, showing Sarah as a teenager, confiding in a friend about her insecurities, her voice trembling, her heart bared. Harold's chest tightened as he realized just how alienated his daughter had felt, how desperately she had sought understanding and support. Do you see? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I was scared, always scared, and you didn't even know. I'm sorry, Sarah, he said, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. I'm so sorry I didn't listen. I didn't know how to handle my own grief, let alone yours. I thought if I just kept things together, everything would be okay. Keeping things together? She echoed incredulously. Look where that got us. I lost my mother, and then I lost you too, in a way. You were right there, but I could never reach you. Tears welled in Harold's eyes as he absorbed her pain. I was a coward, hiding from my own emotions. I see that now, he said, his voice thick with regret, but I want to change. I want to be here for you, truly be here. As the video played on, a tentative connection began to form between them, a fragile thread woven through shared sorrow and unspoken truths. Harold realized that in order to heal, he needed to listen more and speak less, an unfamiliar but necessary shift in their dynamic. Maybe we can start over, he suggested gently, his heart racing at the prospect. I want to understand you, all of you, your dreams, your pain, everything. Sarah looked up at him, her expression softening just a fraction. I want that too, she admitted, her voice trembling, but it's going to take time. I need you to be patient with me. I will, he promised, a sense of resolve filling him. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll face this together, one step at a time. In that moment, amidst the echoes of the past, they found a flicker of hope, a chance to confront their ghosts and begin the healing journey they both so desperately needed. Harold sat in the dim light of his daughter's room, the air thick with unspoken words and the weight of years gone by. The old tape recorder, a relic of a happier time, rested in his hands, its buttons worn from use. As he looked over at Sarah, who sat in her wheelchair, her back straight but her gaze downcast, he felt the urge to bridge the chasm that had grown between them. Just days ago, he had discovered an old diary belonging to Sarah, hidden beneath the clutter in the attic. The thought of reading it filled him with trepidation. He feared what he might learn about her inner turmoil. Sarah, he began hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. I found something. Your diary. He could see her tense at the mention of it, her posture shifting slightly as she looked up at him with wide, apprehensive eyes. You shouldn't have gone through my things, Dad, she replied defensively, her tone sharp. What else did you dig up? I know, he rushed to explain, sensing the familiar defensive wall rising between them. But I think it could help us understand each other better. I found an entry that, well, it talked about how you felt, about feeling pressured, about wanting to be perfect. Sarah turned her head away, her fingers gripping the armrest of her chair. You don't understand. It was just a phase. I was young and stupid. Harold took a deep breath, willing himself to choose his next words carefully. It's not stupid if it mattered to you then. I want to understand. You deserve to be heard. After a moment of silence, Sarah finally spoke, her voice softer, almost a whisper. Fine, read it. With a mixture of anxiety and determination, Harold opened the diary to the marked page. The handwriting was a little shaky, filled with raw emotion. As he began to read aloud, he felt as if he was peeling back layers of pain that had long been buried. Asterisk, I feel like I'm drowning. Everyone expects me to be perfect, but I can't keep up. I wish I could just be me, someone who doesn't have to try so hard to please everyone else. Asterisk, as he read, tears began to well up in both their eyes. Sarah's breath hitched, and Harold struggled to hold back his own emotions. He placed the diary down, looking directly into her eyes. Sarah, I never knew. I never saw how much you were struggling. I tried to tell you, she replied, her voice trembling. But you were always so busy, and I didn't want to burden you. I thought I could handle it on my own. You shouldn't have had to handle it alone, he said, his voice thick with regret. I was so lost in my own grief that I didn't see you needed me, needed us. I can't change the past, but I want to be here for you now. I want to help you find your way back to yourself. With a shaky breath, Sarah wiped her tears and looked down at her lap. I don't even know who I am anymore. I used to dream of being an artist, but that feels so far away now. Harold's heart surged with a mixture of hope and inspiration. Then let's make that happen. Let's explore it together. We can find a way for you to reconnect with that dream. She looked up, a flicker of something, hope perhaps, crossing her face. You really think I could? I believe you can do anything you set your mind to, he replied, his voice steady now. You have so much talent, Sarah. Let's take it one step at a time. In that moment, the walls that had divided them for so long began to crumble. They were still standing on the precipice of their shared pain, but for the first time, they were also on the verge of something new. As they shared their thoughts, fears, and aspirations, it felt as if a fragile thread was weaving their hearts back together. For the first time in years, Harold could see a glimpse of the daughter he had lost, the girl with dreams and laughter, waiting to be rediscovered. Harold stood in the brightly lit art studio, surrounded by vibrant canvases and the smell of paint, a stark contrast to the muted tones of his home. He had finally mustered the courage to enroll Sarah in an adapted art studio, a decision that filled him with both hope and trepidation. As he watched her wheeled into the room, he noticed the uncertainty in her eyes. I don't know, Dad, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I'm not good enough? Just give it a chance, Harold encouraged, clasping her hand gently. You won't know unless you try. You might discover something beautiful about yourself. With a hesitant nod, Sarah allowed herself to be guided into the studio. Over the next few days, Harold accompanied her to classes, witnessing her gradual transformation. Each stroke of the brush revealed a flicker of the vibrant girl she once was, submerged under layers of pain and silence. Look at that one, Dad, Sarah exclaimed one afternoon, pointing to a canvas filled with swirling colors that seemed to dance together. I didn't even plan it. It just happened. It's beautiful, Harold replied, pride swelling in his chest. You're expressing yourself in ways I never imagined. As the weeks passed, Sarah began to embrace the art more deeply, finding solace in the act of creation. The studio became a refuge where her emotions could flow freely onto the canvas, a stark contrast to the bottled-up feelings she had endured for years. One day in class, as the instructor encouraged them to channel their experiences into their artwork, Sarah felt a wave of inspiration wash over her. She decided to paint an image that represented the accident, the night that had changed everything. Are you sure you want to do that? Harold asked, concern evident in his voice as he watched her prepare her materials. I need to, she replied, determination etched on her face. It's part of me, and I can't keep ignoring it. The atmosphere in the room shifted as she painted, each brushstroke a cathartic release of her pent-up emotions. When she finally stepped back to reveal the finished piece, the silence in the studio was palpable. The painting depicted a dark road, illuminated by the headlights of a car, with shadows lurking ominously in the background. As her classmates and the instructor gathered around, Harold stood at the periphery, his heart pounding. He saw the mixture of awe and empathy on their faces. It was a raw, honest representation of her pain, and he felt a lump rise in his throat. Wow, Sarah, one classmate said, tears glistening in her eyes. That's powerful. You've captured so much emotion. Harold stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. It's incredible, sweetheart. You've shown how brave you are by sharing this. Sarah, overwhelmed by the response, felt a surge of relief. In that moment, she realized that her art was not just a means of expression, but a bridge to her healing. Maybe this is how I can process everything, she whispered, a small smile breaking through the tears. Absolutely, Harold replied, deeply moved. You're beginning to understand yourself in ways I never knew you struggled with. As the class ended, Harold and Sarah lingered for a moment, soaking in the vibrancy of the studio. Harold looked at her, a newfound understanding dawning in his heart. Let's keep painting, he suggested, a soft smile on his face. Let's keep exploring what's inside you. Okay, she replied, her voice steadier now. I think I'd like that. With renewed hope, they left the studio together, the bond between them beginning to reshape into something stronger and more resilient. Harold felt the weight of years of silence slowly lifting, replaced by the vibrant colors of their shared journey toward healing. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across the small living room, Harold could sense a shift in the atmosphere. The air was thick with unspoken words, emotions hovering just beneath the surface. He watched Sarah, her brow furrowed in thought thought as she stared at the blank canvas propped against the wall, her fingers twitching with the desire to create but held back by uncertainty. "Do you miss her?" Harold asked softly, breaking the silence that had settled like dust on old memories. Sarah turned her gaze to her father, her blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Every day," she whispered. I wish she were here to see me, to see what I could have been." Harold's heart clenched. He felt the weight of her words, heavy with the grief that had lingered since his late wife's passing. "She would have been so proud of you, Sarah. You have so much talent. I know she'd love to see you paint again." "Talent?" Sarah scoffed, her voice laced with bitterness. "You don't understand, Dad. I'm not the same person I used to be. I'm just broken." "Broken doesn't mean you can't create," he replied, his voice gentle yet firm. "Your mother believed in you, and I do too. We can honor her memory through your art. It's time to let her spirit guide you." At the mention of her mother, Sarah's expression softened momentarily, but the doubt quickly returned. "What if I fail? What if it's not good enough?" "Failure is part of the journey, Sarah. It's how we grow," Harold said, his passion igniting. "Let's do this together. Let's create something that reflects your journey and your mother's love." "And what if I don't want to?" she shot back, her defensiveness rising again. "I know it's hard, but we can't keep avoiding the pain," he urged, his voice steady. "Your mother left us with so many memories, and I think it's time we honor those memories in a way that brings us together instead of keeping us apart." Sarah's eyes flickered with uncertainty as she considered his words. "How do you think we can do that? How about we create an art exhibit in her honor?" Harold suggested, excitement creeping into his voice. "Each piece could tell a part of our story, the good and the bad. It could be a way for you to express everything you've been holding in." "A whole exhibit?" Sarah echoed, surprised by the idea. "Yes, we can invite friends and family. It will be a celebration of her life and your journey," Harold said, his enthusiasm bubbling over. "You can paint what you feel, what you remember, and I'll help with everything else. It'll be cathartic." Sarah paused, contemplating the enormity of the idea. "But what if people don't like it? What if they think I'm just a girl trying to play artist? Then they don't understand the story behind the art," Harold replied, leaning closer, his eyes earnest. "This isn't about impressing anyone. It's about you and your journey. It's about healing." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she processed his words. "Do you really think I can do this?" "I know you can," Harold said, his voice low and reassuring. "Your mother believed in you, and I see that spark in you too. Let's let the world see it." A tentative smile broke through Sarah's facade, the corners of her mouth lifting slightly. Maybe I can try. For Mom." Harold felt a warmth spread through him, hope blooming in the space between them. "That's the spirit. We'll start by gathering your memories and ideas. What do you want to express? What colors do you see when you think of her?" "I see blue," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like the sky on a clear day, bright and endless." "Then let's paint the sky," Harold encouraged, his heart swelling with pride. "Let's make it as beautiful as she was." As they shared their ideas, the pain that had long lingered in their hearts began to ebb away, replaced by the promise of healing and connection. Harold knew they were embarking on a journey that would not only honor his wife's memory, but also help them rediscover each other in the process. Together, they would paint their past and, in doing so, create a bridge toward a brighter future. As the days turned into weeks leading up to the art exhibit, the air in Harold's modest home felt heavy with unspoken words and rising tensions. Sarah spent more time in her room, surrounded by canvases, her brushes untouched. The vibrant colors that once filled her world began to fade into a dull monochrome, reflecting her growing anxiety. Harold, too, felt the strain. His heart ached at the thought of losing the connection they had just begun to rebuild. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room, Sarah emerged from her room, her expression clouded. She wheeled herself into the kitchen where Harold was preparing dinner. He glanced up, sensing the storm brewing behind her eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, trying to bridge the distance that seemed to grow with each passing day. "I don't know, Dad," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I feel like I'm not good enough for this exhibit. What if nobody likes my work? What if I fail?" Harold set down the knife he was using to chop vegetables and turned to face her fully. "You won't fail, Sarah. You've poured your heart into this. People will see that." "But what if they don't?" she shot back, frustration bubbling over. "What if they only see a girl in a wheelchair trying to live up to her mother's memory? I'm not her. and I don't want to be. Harold's chest tightened at her words. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her that she was more than just her mother's daughter, but he also recognized the weight of her fears. You're right, he admitted, choosing his words carefully. You're not your mother. You're Sarah, and you have your own story to tell, but you need to believe in yourself. Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. You don't understand. You don't know what it's like to feel this pressure. All you see is this art exhibit, but for me, it's everything. It's my chance to prove I can be someone, and right now, I don't feel like anyone at all. Harold took a deep breath, feeling the sting of her words. I see you, Sarah. I see your pain, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you, no matter what. You don't have to prove anything to me or anyone else. Then why do you keep pushing me? Sarah's voice cracked, the weight of her emotions spilling over. It feels like you want me to be someone I'm not. I'm not trying to push you to be someone else, he said, his voice rising slightly in frustration. I just want to see you happy. I thought this exhibit was a way for you to share your voice. Maybe it's not what I want, Sarah shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. Maybe I just want to be normal, Dad. I want to be free from all of this. The silence that followed was deafening. Harold felt the air thicken with tension, each unspoken thought hanging like a storm cloud between them. Sarah turned away, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with sobs. Harold's heart shattered at the sight of his daughter's anguish, and he felt helpless. Sarah, he began, his voice trembling. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. I just want to support you. Support me, she echoed bitterly. What does that even mean? To you, I'm just this project you need to fix. You don't understand what I'm going through. Then help me understand, he pleaded, stepping closer. Talk to me, please. She looked up, eyes red and puffy, the fight leaving her. I don't know how, she admitted, her voice small. I just feel trapped. I thought this was going to bring us closer, but it feels like it's tearing us apart. Harold felt a lump in his throat. The truth stung. He had been so focused on the exhibit that he hadn't noticed how it burdened her. I don't want to push you away, he said softly. I want to be here for you. If this isn't what you want, we can figure something else out. Together. Together, she repeated, the word hanging in the air between them like a fragile promise. Together, he affirmed, feeling a flicker of hope. As they sat together in the dim light of the kitchen, the tension began to dissipate, replaced by an understanding that perhaps they both needed to learn how to communicate their fears and desires. But deep down, Harold knew that the road to healing was still long and winding, and the shadows of their past still lingered in the corners of their hearts. Harold sat on the edge of his bed, the early morning light filtering softly through the curtains, casting gentle shadows across the room. A letter lay open in his lap, its yellowed pages crinkled and worn from years of being tucked away. It was a message from his late wife, a reminder of the love they once shared and the dreams they had for their family. As he read her words, he felt an overwhelming wave of nostalgia wash over him, mingled with a sharp pang of regret. She had always emphasized the importance of communication and empathy, urging him to listen more and to be present for their daughter. I wish I had listened better, he murmured to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. He thought of Sarah, how distant she had felt since the accident, how he had often been so engrossed in his own pain that he failed to recognize hers. The realization weighed heavily on him. He needed to reach out to her, to bridge the chasm that had formed between them. After gathering his thoughts, Harold walked down the hall to Sarah's room. He paused outside the door, hesitating for a moment. He could hear the soft sound of her breathing, a rhythmic reminder of her presence. Taking a deep breath, he knocked gently. Sarah, he called softly, can I come in? Yeah, she replied, her voice muffled, but he could sense the fatigue that underlined it. He opened the door and found Sarah sitting in her wheelchair, staring out the window at the garden. The sun cast a warm glow around her, but her expression was distant, lost in her thoughts. Hey, I wanted to talk to you, he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. I found something in the attic that I think we need to discuss. Her eyes flickered towards him, a mix of curiosity and wariness. What is it? She asked, her tone guarded. It's a letter from your mom. She wrote about how important it is to communicate, to really listen to each other, he explained, feeling the weight of his own emotions. I've realized that I haven't been listening to you, Sarah. Not really. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked away, unwilling to let him see her vulnerability. What's the point, Dad? It's too late for all of that, she replied, bitterness creeping into her voice. Please, just hear me out, he urged, his heart racing. I know I've made mistakes. I've let my own pain blind me to yours, and I'm so sorry for that. I should have been there for you when you needed me the most. Sarah's defenses began to crack. You didn't even notice how much I was struggling, she said, her voice trembling. You were so wrapped up in your grief that you forgot I was hurting too. I didn't forget, Sarah, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't know how to help you. I was lost, but I want to try now. I want to understand you and what you're going through." Silence hung heavy in the air, and Harold could see the conflict in her eyes. "Do you really mean that?" she asked quietly, almost timidly. "Yes," he replied, his gaze steady. "I want to listen. I want to know what you're feeling. I want us to heal together." Sarah took a deep breath, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "It's hard, Dad. I don't even know where to start," she admitted, vulnerability seeping into her words. "Then let's start together," he offered, his voice soft yet firm. "Tell me what you need from me. I want to support you, even if it's tough." She looked at him, and for the first time in a long while, Harold saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I just want to be understood," she said. "I want you to see me for who I really am, not just as the girl who got into an accident." "I want that too," he replied earnestly. "You're still my daughter, Sarah. You're so much more than what happened that night. Let's find a way to rediscover who you are." They shared a moment of silence, both lost in their thoughts, but the air between them felt lighter, charged with a newfound determination. Harold felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, and he knew that this was just the beginning of their journey together. "Can we try?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Can we work on this together?" "Yeah," Sarah said, a small smile breaking through her earlier sadness. "I'd like that." In that moment, Harold understood that healing would take time, but with open hearts and honest conversations, they could begin to build a bridge over the chasm that had separated them for so long. The day of the exhibit arrived with a bittersweet mix of excitement and anxiety hanging in the air. Harold stood at the entrance of the small gallery, watching as friends and community members streamed in, their faces lit with curiosity and warmth. The walls were adorned with Sarah's vibrant paintings, each canvas a reflection of her journey, her pain, and her resilience. Harold felt a swell of pride in his chest, but it was accompanied by a lingering apprehension. Tonight was not only about showcasing Sarah's talent, but also about confronting the past that had haunted them for so long. As the crowd mingled, Harold noticed Sarah moving from one painting to another, her wheelchair gliding smoothly over the polished floor. She paused at a particularly striking piece, a swirling mix of colors that seemed to embody chaos and beauty. "This one," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, "represents the night everything changed." Harold approached her, feeling the weight of her words. "It's beautiful, Sarah. You've captured so much emotion," he said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm so proud of you." She turned to him, her eyes glistening. "I just hope they understand what it all means." As the evening progressed, the gallery filled with laughter and conversation. Harold watched as Sarah engaged with the visitors, her confidence blossoming with each compliment. "Your work is incredible, Sarah," one woman exclaimed, her eyes shining with admiration. "You have such a unique perspective." "Thank you," Sarah replied, her smile radiant. "It's all about expressing how I feel." With each passing moment, Harold felt a sense of healing wash over him. Perhaps this was the turning point they both needed. Just as he began to relax, an old friend of Sarah's, Ethan, stepped into the gallery. Harold recognized him from years ago, a boy who had often visited their home. "Hey, Sarah, your art looks amazing," Ethan said, his voice buoyant as he approached her. "Thanks, Ethan. It means a lot to me that you came," she replied, her smile brightening even more. Harold's heart tightened as he watched them interact. There was a familiarity between them that stirred something within him, a flicker of unease that he couldn't quite place. Ethan's presence felt like a thread pulling at an old wound, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to unravel. As the evening wore on, Sarah took the stage to give her presentation. She cleared her throat, the room falling silent in anticipation. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady but soft. "This exhibit is not just about my art. It's about my journey and the love and pain that shaped it. Each painting tells a story, and I hope you can feel what I felt while creating them." Harold watched proudly as she spoke, her passion lighting up the room. But just as she finished, Ethan raised his hand, a serious expression clouding his features. "Can I say something?" he asked, his voice cutting through the moment. "Of course," Sarah replied, her brow furrowing slightly. Ethan stood up, glancing around the room before focusing on Sarah. "I want to share something about the night of the accident," he said, his tone grave. "I was there, and I think it's important for everyone to know what really happened." A murmur ran through the crowd, and Harold's heart raced. He stepped forward, instinctively wanting to shield Sarah from whatever revelation lay ahead. "Ethan, maybe now isn't the time," he interjected, his voice low but urgent. "No, Harold, it's important. Ethan insisted, his gaze unwavering. Sarah needs to know the truth. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. What do you mean? What truth? She asked, her voice trembling. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. There were more people involved that night than you realize. It wasn't just you and me, Sarah. There were others. And, well, things happened that changed everything. Harold felt the tension in the room spike, the air thick with unspoken questions. Sarah took a step back, her face pale. What are you saying, Ethan? She asked, her voice rising. You're scaring me. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Harold felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He looked at his daughter, her eyes wide with shock and fear, and realized that the night that had defined their lives was still casting shadows over them. Let's take a break, Harold said, trying to maintain control over the spiraling situation. He knew this was a moment that could change everything for them, but he also understood that they needed to navigate it together. As he glanced at Sarah, he saw the uncertainty in her eyes, the same uncertainty that had plagued them both for years. The night, which had begun with hope and celebration, now hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of painful revelations. Harold took a deep breath, preparing himself for the difficult conversation ahead, knowing that the truth, no matter how painful, was the only way forward. As the crowd buzzed with excitement around the exhibit, a vibrant display of colors and emotions, Sarah felt a wave of unease wash over her. She had just unveiled her pieces, each one a fragment of her heart, but the joy of the moment felt overshadowed. When an old friend approached her, claiming to have witnessed the accident that had changed her life, Sarah's pulse quickened. She suddenly felt as if the ground beneath her had shifted. Sarah, wait, Harold called out, noticing the tension between her and the visitor. His heart raced as he saw Sarah's face drain of color. She stepped away from the group, seeking refuge in a quieter corner of the venue, her breath coming in short gasps. The visitor, Jake, a familiar face from Sarah's past, followed her. I just wanted to talk, Sarah. You need to know the truth about that night. Harold, still a few steps behind, felt the tightening in his chest. He could sense the impending storm, the shadows of the past threatening to engulf the fragile bond he and Sarah had begun to build. Sarah, what's going on? He asked, his voice laced with concern as he joined them. You don't understand, Dad, Sarah replied, her voice trembling. He was there. He saw everything. Jake stepped forward, his expression earnest yet troubled. I didn't mean to bring this up, but you need to hear it. You weren't alone that night, Sarah. There were others. What do you mean? Harold interjected, his brow furrowed in confusion. What others? Jake took a deep breath, the weight of his words heavy in the air. There were 4 of us. We were all at the party, and things got out of hand. You know how the night ended. But you need to know, it wasn't just you and your friend there. I was with you. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. What? No, it was just me and... Rachel, Jake interrupted gently. You have to understand, Rachel was the one driving. She was scared, and I was trying to help her. But you were there too, and you need to know that you weren't to blame for everything that happened. I don't understand, Sarah said, stepping back as if to distance herself from the memories that flooded back. Why didn't I know? Why didn't anyone tell me? Harold stood there, feeling the walls closing in. What do you mean, Jake? What happened that night? His voice was steady, but inside, anxiety twisted his gut. Jake hesitated, looking between father and daughter. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, but Rachel wasn't just your friend. She had been drinking, and I was trying to keep her calm. When the accident happened, it was chaos. You were in shock. You didn't even know what was happening. Stop, Sarah shouted, her voice breaking. You're saying I wasn't even in control? That I didn't know what was happening? You're just trying to make excuses, but that's not it at all. I'm trying to help you understand. Jake's desperation was palpable. You've been carrying this guilt for years, thinking it was all your fault, but it wasn't just you. You were part of something bigger, something you didn't even realize. Harold stepped closer to Sarah, his heart aching for her. Honey, is this true? Did you really think you were alone in this? Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I've thought about it every single day. I've blamed myself for everything. I didn't know there were others involved. I thought I was the reason. Sarah, please. Jake implored, his voice softer now. You were never alone. I thought you deserved to know the truth. You've been through so much pain, and I didn't want to add to it, but you need to let this go. You can't keep punishing yourself. The revelation hit like a tidal wave. Harold felt helpless, torn between wanting to comfort his daughter and needing to understand the truth himself. Sarah, we can work through this. This doesn't have to define you. But how can I move on from this? Knowing I was part of something so terrible? Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper, the weight of her past bearing down on her. Harold reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. We'll figure it out together. We'll face it together. As they stood there, the storm of emotions swirling around them, Sarah realized that perhaps this was the beginning of a new chapter. The truth, as painful as it was, could also be a pathway to healing. "I want to understand," she said finally, looking into her father's eyes, determination mingling with vulnerability. "I need to know everything." In that moment, Harold felt a glimmer of hope amidst the hidden complexities of their shared past. They had a long way to go, but perhaps now, with the truth laid bare, they could start to untangle the web of silence that had held them captive for so long. Together, they would confront the shadows, one painful revelation at a time.